As hard as it is to believe, 2025 is almost behind us. And if you tuned into our compilation earlier this week, you'll know that we're commemorating the occasion by taking a look back at some of the strangest crime stories we've covered this year. Today's video is going to be focusing exclusively on stories from our Crimes of the Week International series. Just a heads up, because this is a compilation style video, keep in mind these segments have not been edited since they appeared on their respective lists. So references to specific charges as well as other small details may no longer apply. If you missed the video from earlier this week, we've included a link to that in the description below. Just before we get into the video, we wanted to take a second to thank each and every one of you for watching this year. We know that there are so many people and things out there asking for your attention, and we're both honored and grateful that you've chosen to spend your valuable free time with us. So wherever you're tuning in from, thank you so much, have a safe and happy new year, and here's to an even better 2026. Representatives from the Zambia police service say that one of their own officers found himself behind bars last week after he freed more than a dozen inmates from a local police station, something he allegedly did because he wanted them to be able to enjoy the New Year's holiday. The whole thing started at around 10 a.m. on December 31st, when the officer in question, Detective Inspector Titus Piri, was on duty at the Leonard Chilo police station in the capital of Lusaka. Despite the early hour, it appears that Piri was already in quite the festive mood. According to reports, he was hitting the alcohol pretty hard. Not only that, but he was determined to make sure he wasn't the only one having a good time. After forcibly taking the keys from one of his fellow officers, Piri headed into the prisoner holding area. He then allegedly began unlocking the cell doors, telling the inmates that they could leave and that they were, quote, free to cross over into the new year. 13 of the 15 people in custody managed to escape the building before Piri fled himself, presumably to continue his celebrations elsewhere. By the time the situation was reported to higher-up officials, several hours had apparently passed, and all of the escaped inmates were long gone. According to local news sources, the suspects were in custody for a variety of offenses, including assault, robbery, and burglary. At the time of this recording, it seems that the only person authorities have been able to track down is Piri himself. He was quickly arrested over the stunt on charges of aiding suspects to escape from lawful custody. Currently, a manhunt is ongoing to try and find the 13 missing inmates. If you've been a viewer of this series for a while now, chances are you'll know that Japan has a reputation for taking crime very seriously. However, I have to admit that even with all of the stories I've read about from the country over the years, this next one still caught me by surprise. It all started sometime on September 17th of last year, when a 41-year-old man walked into a supermarket in the city of Sapporo. While browsing the aisles, he picked up a couple packages of ground beef. He then attempted to walk out of the business without paying. All of this was noticed by the store's 56-year-old security guard, who promptly went to stop the man. However, when he did, the suspect shoved him out of the way before he could react and managed to escape. Now, if this took place in North America, Europe, or really anywhere else in the world, this would probably be where the story ended. Unfortunately, the reality is that for most store owners, dealing with shoplifters is just part of the cost of doing business. However, as I'm sure you've already guessed, that's not what happened here. After being alerted to the incident, Sapporo police not only launched an investigation, they spent the next 3 months using the country's extensive CCTV network to track the beef thief. That's how they were ultimately able to arrest him on December 23rd in Chita City in Aichi Prefecture. If this doesn't already sound like going the extra mile, so to speak, allow me to show you where Chita City is relative to Sapporo. By most methods, it's a more than 900-mile journey. I should also point out that these packs of ground beef reportedly cost 184 yen. It's not clear from reports if that's 184 yen each or in total, but that means at most we're talking about like $2.30 US of ground beef here. Imagine if someone stole a Twinkie in New York City and the NYPD chased them to Jacksonville, Florida. That's basically what we're talking about here. While it can certainly be questioned whether this is the best or most productive use of police resources, if you ask me, there's something kind of refreshing about it at the same time. And one thing's for sure, The 41-year-old suspect in this case definitely isn't going to try shoplifting anytime soon. Representatives from the Hong Kong police force say that a would-be thief is in custody this week, following an equally bizarre and terrifying incident in which he allegedly tried to rob a woman while high on drugs with a bunch of fake money stuffed into his pants. According to local news sources, the whole thing happened shortly before 2 p.m. on January 14th, when the victim, a woman identified only by the last name of Eng, used an ATM in the city's Mongkok shopping district. After withdrawing 20,000 Hong Kong dollars, the equivalent of about 2,600 USD, she began walking down the road towards a nearby plaza. What she didn't know, though, was that a man was following closely behind her. He trailed her for about 100 yards before attacking her and trying to snatch her purse. Luckily for the woman, 2 bystanders who saw what was going on immediately jumped in to help, one of whom was an off-duty police officer. They managed to restrain the robber until more help could arrive. When police got to the scene, they questioned the suspect, identified by the last name of Kwok, who told them that he had taken space oil that day. For those unaware, space oil is the name of a new street drug that has recently exploded in popularity across Hong Kong. It comes in liquid form and is generally vaped by users. There is apparently no standard recipe, so to speak, for the drug, though it often contains mixtures of cannabinoids, ketamine, and etomidate, a medical-grade sedative. Following Kwok's arrest, one more strange discovery was made. While searching his person, officers reportedly found 21 fake $500 Hong Kong banknotes stuffed into his underwear. So far, it's unclear why Kwok had the counterfeit currency or where he got it. When the incident was over, both Kwok and Eng were taken to a local hospital. The female victim was treated for minor injuries, while Kwok was taken in for a mental health evaluation. A Thai Good Samaritan is probably going to be thinking twice next time he sees a person in need, after he stopped to help at the scene of an accident, only to find himself the victim of a stomach-churning crime. The whole thing began sometime on the evening of January 11th, when the Good Samaritan in question, identified as a 29-year-old man by the name of Titipakan, was driving his motorbike in Bang Pakong district in the province of Chachoengsao. As he was traveling along a local road, he was behind a pair of vehicles, a truck and a sedan, when suddenly the two of them collided. Concerned about the safety of those involved, Titipakan ran to check on the drivers. While thankfully both of them were physically unharmed, it quickly became clear that the driver of the pickup truck, a 57-year-old man, was extremely drunk. Immediately, the 57-year-old denied that anything was his fault, claiming that the driver of the sedan had caused the accident by stopping short. However, the rest of the bizarre truth soon came out. The 57-year-old admitted that he was rushing home at the time of the collision because he was having diarrhea and things were getting dicey. He also said that he needed to borrow Titipakan's motorbike so that he could find a bathroom before it was too late. When Titipakan refused because the 57-year-old was in no condition to be driving anywhere, things took a truly disgusting turn. There's no easy way to say this. The man shit his pants right there in the middle of the road. He then, in a fit of rage, smeared some of it on Titipakan's face. I guess you might say that both of them were shit-faced at that point. You know, one literally, the other figuratively. Anyway, when police arrived at the scene a short time later, they instructed the 57-year-old man to clean himself and his soiled pants off in a roadside ditch. He apparently continued pooping himself in that same ditch. According to local media reports, so far no charges have been brought against the 57-year-old, but fines and other offenses are expected to be levied in the coming days. Authorities in Japan's Saitama Prefecture say that a 46-year-old man was arrested this week after he allegedly stole an ambulance he called after becoming fed up with paramedics during the middle of a drunken episode. According to reports, the whole thing started shortly before 7 p.m. on January 20th, when emergency responders were called to a home in the city of Kiku. They arrived to find a 46-year-old man, later identified as Hiroshi Hirata, who was complaining of stomach pain and saying that he needed to go to the hospital. The 3 paramedics who responded to the call checked Hirata out, but determined that there was nothing wrong with him. He was just too drunk and probably needed to take it easy. However, this was apparently not what Hirata wanted to hear. After pulling out a knife on the emergency workers, he allegedly threatened them, then hopped behind the wheel of their ambulance and drove off. The 46-year-old didn't make it very far, though. According to police, they found him and the ambulance in the parking lot of a drugstore about 100 yards down the road and immediately arrested him. When questioned, Hirata reportedly explained his actions this way, telling police, quote, "I thought I would go to the hospital myself." Authorities in Argentina's Buenos Aires province say that they investigated quite the bizarre burglary last week after an accused thief managed to slip through a small opening in order to rob a convenience store, something that was made all the more impressive by the fact that the suspect only has one leg. The strange situation unfolded in the early morning hours of January 15th at the store in question in the town of Paso del Rey. Surveillance footage shows the unidentified man walking past the 24-hour business shortly before 4:30 a.m. when he notices that the employee who is supposed to be working is fast asleep. After dropping off some of his stuff, the suspect returns to the store about 10 minutes later. That's when he proceeds to climb through a small opening in the business's security gate meant to be used to serve customers who want to make purchases outside of the normal store hours. The accused thief was not only limber, it turned out he was also very efficient. After having a quick search around the inside, he managed to steal a cell phone and the equivalent of about $20 US in cash before crawling back out the same way he came in. He did it all in just 53 seconds and without waking up the sleeping employee. Unfortunately for the thief, it seems his own skill may have been his undoing. Footage of the one-legged man quickly went viral online when it was shared, allowing police to identify and arrest him within a matter of hours. At the time of this recording, no information has been released about the possible charges he will now be facing. Okay, technically this last story isn't so much a crime as it is a traffic violation, but we still decided to include it to round out today's show because we thought you'd all get a kick out of it. The whole thing began recently when a Taiwanese man, identified only by the last name of Lee, received a ticket in the mail. The ticket was for failing to yield at a crosswalk while he was driving through a busy pedestrian area in Lienchiang County back near the end of December. This might not sound that interesting until you find out that the ticket was accompanied by a photo of the incident. That photo revealed something pretty ridiculous, which was brought to the public's attention last week thanks to a social media post from Lee's son. The post read in part, quote, "My dad got a 6,000 New Taiwan dollar fine for failing to yield to pedestrians. The pedestrians were me and my sister." It turned out that on the day of the incident, Lee had given his kids a ride to a local ferry terminal. After dropping them off, he circled around the block, where he sped through a crosswalk without stopping, at the exact time his own kids were trying to cross the road. The whole story quickly went viral in Taiwan, with many commenters chiming in with their own thoughts, especially concerning the photo of the traffic violation, which some jokingly referred to as a family portrait. All kidding aside, Taiwan is known as a place that is pretty dangerous for pedestrians in general, and according to authorities, 21% of pedestrian deaths are the result of drivers hitting people in situations just like this. If nothing else, hopefully Lee's new family portrait is a reminder to be a little more patient on the road. An accused Russian thief was left red-faced in more than one way this week after he allegedly robbed a convenience store while drunk, and not only was he quickly caught, but footage of his bumbling exploits were posted online. According to reports, it all started on the night of January 20th when the accused thief, who has not been identified by name, set out to rob the convenience store in question in the town of Turuntayevo. Surveillance footage from inside shows him walking into the business shortly after 10 p.m. wearing a balaclava and carrying what would later be proven to be a toy gun. After pointing the fake weapon at the person behind the counter, the man can be seen fiddling with his mask, and you can sort of tell that something isn't quite right. That's because he was apparently very drunk, something which became obvious as the man began to visibly sway back and forth while demanding that the employee hand over some alcohol. Even though more alcohol was probably the last thing the man needed, he was clearly determined as he proceeded to try and climb over the counter himself after becoming impatient. Though he successfully managed to grab a bottle of vodka, Pulling himself back over turned out to be much more difficult than he bargained for in his drunken state, and ended up falling further towards the ground. Things got even more cartoonish when, in the middle of this, a customer walked in. The customer can be seen looking understandably confused at the man's legs dangling in the air, investigating what was going on before presumably spotting the fake gun and running away. While the thief managed to get away with the stolen bottle of vodka, apparently his celebration was short-lived. Police were able to track him down not long after, at which point he was arrested and his gun was determined to be a toy. Representatives from New Zealand's Auckland Police released some equally strange and amusing footage on their social media account this week. Video that shows part of a recent arrest that has been referred to as a low-speed pursuit. The whole thing reportedly began sometime on the morning of January 1st when police were called about a burglary in progress at a residential property in the small rural town of Karaka. Officers were quick to respond, but by the time they got there, the male suspect had already fled. It turned out that this wasn't a problem, though, due in large part to the suspect's choice of getaway vehicle. He had taken off in the victim's riding lawnmower. Police began searching the area, and sure enough, the man was not difficult to find. That's where this piece of amazing surveillance footage comes in, which shows 3 officers chasing down the suspect while he drives down a nearby bike path. Hilariously, the suspect can be seen looking over his shoulder as the officers quickly gain on him. Moments later, he's grabbed, and the lawnmower chase comes to an end. While few other details have been released about the case, authorities say that the male suspect is 34 years old and was arrested at the scene. He has since been charged with burglary and is expected to appear in court on March 21st. Representatives from England's Greater Manchester Police say that a fugitive partially has herself to thank for her successful arrest last week, days after she attempted to taunt authorities by commenting on her own wanted poster. According to reports, the whole thing started a little over a week ago when Greater Manchester Police put out an appeal on their Facebook account for the 22-year-old woman in question. While her identity has since been redacted and is not available at this time, it said that she was wanted for failing to appear in court for 3 counts of assault on an emergency worker, drug offenses, and theft. Police were understandably hoping that members of the public would chime in with helpful tips and information, but what they never expected was a lead directly from the suspect herself. However, that's exactly what they got when the woman responded to the post with her personal account, replying, quote, "Hey guys." While the response was obviously intended as a taunting joke, unfortunately for the 22-year-old, it was police who got the last laugh. Using her reply and the many others it prompted in the comments below, they were ultimately able to track her down at a home in Manchester's Fallowfield area. As if that wasn't enough, a short clip of body cam footage that was also released this week shows part of the ridiculous arrest. In it, the woman can be seen hiding beneath a pile of toys inside the residence and pretending she isn't there, even after officers have clearly found her. In addition to the offenses the woman was already facing, police say that she has also been arrested on another charge of assaulting an officer. Authorities in Thailand's Chonburi province say that they were able to avert a potential tragedy this week after a man was found passed out drunk next to his amusingly decorated motorized scooter. The whole thing happened sometime this week when concerned members of the public began contacting police in Sattahip district. The callers reported seeing a man who looked like he might be a danger to himself and others. The man had parked his scooter on the wrong side of the road and appeared to be passed out next to it on the sidewalk. When officers arrived at the scene, they found the man in question, who was still out like a light on the pavement. Next to him was his Honda Scoopy, which they noticed had been adorned with a large Hello Kitty plush toy on the front. Upon being shaken awake, the man, who was clearly intoxicated, apparently began to panic. According to police, he shoved 2 inhalers in his nostrils and began puffing in a bizarre bid to sober up. Despite the man's repeated claims that he was fine to drive, given what they had just witnessed, officers did not believe him. All the same, though, they decided to cut him a bit of slack since, although he was driving drunk, he had clearly pulled off the road intending to sleep it off. Instead of arresting him, one of them took him as a passenger on their own bike and drove him home, while another officer followed behind on the Hello Kitty bike. It was an eventful Valentine's Day for authorities in Peru last week, where members of the country's national police carried out a holiday-themed raid on an unsuspecting drug trafficking suspect. If you're a regular viewer of our Crimes of the Week international series, you'll probably know that Peru has something of a history with these kinds of colorful operations. In fact, it's something that the anti-drug unit, known as the Green Squadron, have become known for over the years. On holidays such as Halloween, Christmas, and, of course, Valentine's Day, officers will dress up in costumes to throw off their designated targets. In the past, the costumes of choice have included superheroes, such as Spider-Man, Captain America, Wolverine, and Deadpool. And last year, you might remember that we covered a similar Valentine's Day story, where an undercover officer dressed up as a giant teddy bear. However, I have to say, this time around, authorities really outdid themselves. Not only was this year's costume pretty next level, the officer inside really went above and beyond. In footage released by the National Police of Peru this week, the undercover officer can be seen standing outside the suspect's home in the capital of Lima, dressed as a capybara. The giant rodent, who is wearing a little turtle backpack with hearts on it, pretends to deliver a gift to the suspect's front door before forcing his way inside. And this is where things truly got wild. Unlike in previous cases we've covered where the costumed officer serves mainly as a distraction, Officer Capybara wasn't afraid to get right into the fray. After making his way into the property, he was caught on footage restraining the male suspect before perp-walking him from the house. Afterwards, he even took part in a photo to commemorate the bust. According to police, they seized more than 1,700 baggies of cocaine and marijuana, which had been packaged for sale. At the time of this recording, the suspect's name has not been released, though he reportedly remains in custody. Authorities in the South Korean city of Busan say that a bumbling robber got more than he bargained for last week when he attempted to hold up a bank using a disguised children's toy as his weapon, but his bluff was quickly called by his would-be victims. According to reports, the whole thing began just before 11 a.m. on February 10th, when the suspect, identified only as a man in his 30s, went to the bank in question in Busan's Xi'an district. After heading up to the second floor of the building where the business was located, the man began blocking the entrance, yelling for customers and employees to, quote, kneel down. Upon seeing that the man was wearing a mask and knit hat over his head and carrying what appeared to be a gun in a black plastic trash bag, many of the terrified victims hurried to obey the order. Initially, the suspect tried to get into the branch manager's office. However, he was quickly able to shut the door and hold it while he and a customer were inside. At the same time, he called police and triggered a security alert. Realizing he wasn't going to be getting inside, the male suspect turned his attention to the bank's tellers. He instructed them to put 50,000 Korean won banknotes into a bag, each of which are worth about $35 US. Unfortunately for the suspect, it was at this point that his whole plan unraveled. While he was distracted, a man in his 50s tackled him to the ground. This provided an opening for a security guard and 3 other bank employees to jump in, all of whom helped restrain him. If there were any remaining fears about the danger the suspect posed, these evaporated when the man was disarmed and the victims got a look at the gun he was carrying. It turned out to be a children's water gun, one that was shaped like a dinosaur. According to reports, it took just 2 minutes for the whole thing to play out, and the suspect was taken into custody by police immediately after. While his name has not been released, at the time of this recording, the Good Samaritan who first took him down has been identified as former Special Forces member Park Chung-yu. Police say that they plan to present Park a certificate of appreciation for his brave and decisive actions during the incident. After all, at the time he tackled the suspect, he had no way of knowing that the only thing he was risking was getting squirted in the face. Representatives from England's North Yorkshire Police say that they are investigating quite the unusual situation this week after a life-size plastic sculpture of a cow was stolen from a local property. According to police, the bulky bovine was stolen from a farm property in the village of Kirkby, Overblow. It's not exactly clear when it was taken, though it's suspected that the theft happened sometime between January 14th and 28th. Apparently, the giant plastic cow had been purchased by its owner for £700, or about $900 US, many years ago, and had often been mistaken for a real cow by passers-by. In fact, the owner says that those who stole it might even have initially believed they were stealing a live animal. Despite missing his oversized decoration and hoping he'll get it back, the cow's owner doesn't appear to be holding any grudges. He told local media that those responsible were likely drunk kids who had taken it for a laugh, which he can't really fault them for because the reason he bought the cow in the first place is that he thought it was funny. In fact, he says the whole thing is kind of impressive. Given the plastic cow's weight, he estimates that it would have taken at least 3 people to move it, and that they would have needed to come prepared. He stated, quote, "They must have had a van or a roof rack or something. You can imagine all sorts of hilarious pictures with the cow on top of a roof rack. There's no damage to the fences or anything, so they've done it very elegantly." The man explained that part of his good humor is because he'd rather kids be doing dumb stuff like this than something more serious. Still, he hopes that his cow will turn up soon. North Yorkshire police are asking for members of the public to please come forward with any information they might have about the case. In a statement, they said in part, quote, "We would particularly appreciate any sightings of this moving cow and any details that could help us return it to its rightful owner." A Frenchman has reportedly found himself in quite the bizarre situation after he was recently the victim of a theft, only to discover that the same people that had victimized him might be in a position to provide him with a sizable payday. The whole thing began on February 3rd, when the victim, identified only as Jean-David E., returned to his car in the city of Toulouse to find that it had been broken into. Thieves had forced their way inside the vehicle, making off with his backpack that also contained his wallet. Things got even more annoying for Jean-David when he called his credit card company and learned that the culprits had already used his card to make contactless payments at a convenience store close to the crime scene. However, that's when the case began to take a strange turn. After traveling to the store in person to speak to employees and see if they knew anything about the thieves, a cashier told Jean-David something he never expected. The staff member said that yes, he definitely remembered them. The 2 unknown men, who appeared to be homeless, had bought some cigarettes and a bunch of scratch cards. One of those scratch cards happened to be the winner of a €500,000 jackpot. Upon learning this, Jean-David contacted police, who in turn reached out to the local lottery and gaming commission, known as the FDJ. The FDJ said that the men had not yet tried to claim the prize, but if they did, they would not be eligible since they had used a stolen credit card to make the purchase. However, on the flip side, Jean-David couldn't claim the prize, since he both didn't have the winning ticket and wasn't the one that had purchased it. Here's where things get really crazy. Essentially, Jean-David is now in a situation where neither he nor the criminals can claim the €500,000 on their own. But if they were to work together, there's a chance they could split the prize. Jean-David is now suggesting that this is exactly what they try and do. In interviews with local media, he said he's willing to let bygones be bygones so long as the thieves come forward with the winning scratch ticket and agree to split the funds 50-50. He noted that it could be a win-win. He could pay off his mortgage, and the men could each get enough money to turn their lives around. Unfortunately, there's one more wrench thrown into all of this, and that's the final term and condition associated with this scratch ticket. According to FDJ rules, the prize has to be claimed within 30 days of the purchase date. That date is fast approaching, but Jean-David is hoping that by getting the story out, he can reach the thieves and show them he is serious. He stated during an interview, quote, "Unless they contact my lawyer, the ticket is unusable, so why not settle amicably and do 50-50? For that amount of money, I'm ready to come to an agreement." Authorities in Taiwan say that a man was officially indicted last week, almost exactly a year after he concocted a harebrained fake robbery scheme in order to get a free ride across town. According to reports, the whole thing began at around 11 p.m. on February 26, 2024, when a man called police in Kaohsiung City telling them that he needed to report a crime. The man, identified by the last name Lai, claimed that he'd just been robbed by 2 people on a white motorcycle who had taken off with his wallet. After responding to the call, officers picked Lai up and drove him to their station in Xiaogang district to file a report. However, as they began to look more into the situation, they realized that they'd been duped. You see, in addition to being his name, it turned out that Lai also happened to be an accurate way to sum up the story the man had told. Upon reviewing surveillance footage from the area he claimed to be in when he was robbed, police found no evidence of any crime. That's when Lai admitted he made the whole thing up. After being handed over to prosecutors, the man attempted to get creative, saying that he suffered from a nervous system disorder that made him think he'd been robbed. But authorities say eventually he revealed the much more simple and much more stupid truth. He had reported the fake robbery because he wanted a ride across town, but he didn't have money for a taxi. Last week, Lai was officially indicted for making a false accusation and is now awaiting further proceedings. Unfortunately, local media sources do not specify what penalties prosecutors are seeking against the floundering freeloader. Authorities in the English county of Northumberland say that a bumbling career criminal was sentenced to jail time last week after he was linked to a string of burglaries late last year thanks to the inventive actions of one of his would-be victims. According to reports, the whole thing began in November of 2024 when an unidentified homeowner from the town of Blyth became fed up with his property being broken into. Tired of feeling helpless, he came up with a low-budget but clever solution. Using a bucket and a length of fishing line, he set up what has been referred to as a Home Alone-style trap. Essentially, he filled the bucket with water and placed it on his garden wall, running the fishing line across a nearby path that led to his back door and window. On November 9th, the man went outside and noticed that the trap had been set off. Using this as an indicator, he checked his surveillance cameras and came across this footage. The video shows a man prowling around the back of the homeowner's property. As he heads towards the back door, he trips the bucket trap, soaking his shoes and creating enough noise and movement for the nearby floodlights to come on. The burglar is so startled that he flees the scene immediately. While the man had his face covered in the footage, when the homeowner turned it over to police, they were quickly able to identify him. His name is Paul Howell, a 56-year-old career criminal with more than 100 previous convictions. Howell was arrested about a week after the November incident, though unfortunately by that time he'd victimized at least one other family. Unlike in the bucket trap incident, frustratingly he was able to get away with several $100s worth of the victim's items and valuables that time. That being said, the evidence at the crime scene did help to build the case against him. On February 17th, Howell was convicted of attempted burglary and was sentenced to 3 years and 7 months in prison. Representatives from Colombia's national police released some quite literally hair-raising footage last week after a would-be smuggler was caught trying to board a plane with a large amount of drugs stashed in an amusing way. According to reports, it all went down on February 20th when the 40-year-old unidentified suspect tried to board a plane at the Rafael Núñez International Airport in the city of Cartagena. The man was planning to head to Amsterdam, however, unfortunately for him, he wouldn't be making his flight. In video released by the National Police, you can see why. As officers removed a toupee from the top of his head, they discovered a large amount of cocaine hidden inside. According to authorities, 19 capsules full of the drug were recovered from under the hairpiece, weighing a total of nearly half a pound. Had the drugs made their way to Europe, it's estimated they would have been worth the equivalent of more than $10,000 US. While it appears the toupee was actually quite well made, and as you can see, officers had to cut it from his head to remove it, fooling the human eye wasn't enough. As soon as the 40-year-old suspect walked through the airport scanners, security officials could tell something was up, and the man's drug-in-a-rug scheme came crashing down. Police say the man was immediately arrested after the discovery, and he already had 2 prior convictions for drug trafficking. Representatives from Japan's Hokkaido Prefectural Police released an announcement in connection with an equally bizarre and revolting case this week, revealing that they had arrested a 58-year-old unemployed man who was accused of putting urine into the soap dispensers of a business last year. The whole thing started sometime in the fall of 2024 when employees at a drugstore in the town of Nakashibetsu began to notice a strange trend. On multiple occasions, the soap in the dispenser of their bathroom became discolored for no apparent reason. Staff members kept an eye on this and kept changing the soap out until the evening of November 18th. That's when one eagle-eyed employee noticed that the soap had changed color yet again, right after a particular customer left the restroom. When questioned, the customer, identified as 58-year-old Kazuyoshi Tateoka, apparently revealed the awful reason why. He had been mixing piss into the soap. Following an investigation, police say that they arrested Tateoka this week, on March 3rd. He apparently was not shy about what he'd done either, telling officers, quote, "I did it to cause trouble for people." While the full reasoning for the 58-year-old's disgusting behavior will likely never be known, it seems that he probably did this several times. He is currently being held on suspicion of fraudulent obstruction of business. An accused Australian thief was apparently foiled by his own sweet tooth this week when he broke into a business with the intention of looting it, only to get distracted by its signature desserts. The whole thing began around noon on March 8th, when brothers Alec and Paul Carney were alerted to a concerning situation at one of their stores. The brothers, who are also business partners and operators of a chain of Italian restaurants, were notified by their security system that someone was breaking into their location in the Gold Coast suburb of Nobby Beach. Because it was the middle of the day, the restaurant normally would have been packed with employees and hungry customers. However, because of Cyclone Alfred, like many business owners, the brothers had chosen to temporarily shut down. It seemed that the thief had chosen to take advantage of this fact to commit a brazen broad daylight looting. Understandably horrified by what was going on, Alec and Paul called police. They also began racing down to the scene themselves in their 1-ton food truck. However, as the brothers continued to watch the video feed from their security cameras, something strange began to happen. While the thief did start out by poking around the restaurant's cash register, he quickly got distracted by something else: the business's gelato. The thief began helping himself to scoop after scoop of the frozen Italian treat, seemingly unable to control his appetite. He got so into this, in fact, that he seemingly forgot that he put his phone down during the middle of the feeding frenzy. And while he remembered to steal a couple bottles of liquor on his way out, he ended up leaving the device behind. By the time the sweet-toothed crook realized his mistake, it was too late. After coming back to the business a second time, he was caught by Paul and Alec, who began a low-speed chase in their truck. The pursuit ended with the man unwittingly running right into police as they arrived at the scene as well. He was arrested and has now been charged with entering premises and committing an indictable offense and unlawful possession of suspected stolen property. So far, his name has not been released, and he's been identified only as a 40-year-old man. Speaking about the burglary in an interview with local media, Alex stated in part, quote, "We were a bit worried at the start, and then we realized they walked past all the expensive liquor and wine and went straight for the gelato cabinet. He had a bit of everything, but he definitely had a good dig at the pistachio. There was a little bit of humor in the whole thing, because it was like a mouse trap with the cheese. He walked past the gelati cabinet, and it was like, ooh, gelati." Despite how everything played out, the brothers also say they're not holding a grudge. In the same interview, Paul said that the thief would not be banned from the business, telling him, quote, "Come down to Gelato Gemelli in Nobby's, and we'll be more than happy to give you a free sample, even if he wants to come back for a free scoop." Authorities in Peru say that an investigation into a baffling series of burglaries took a bizarre and amusing turn this week, after what was initially thought to be the work of a criminal gang instead resulted in the capture of an unlikely suspect. According to local media sources, the whole thing started sometime last week, when police in the city of Ica began receiving multiple reports about break-ins from residents of the San Isidro housing complex. Over a period of several days, victims said that they had arrived home to find that their places had been ransacked. Because all of the incidents occurred at the same location, authorities theorized that they were looking for a group of thieves that were familiar with the area. However, there was something about the situation that didn't add up. You see, while furniture and other items were thrown around at all of the crime scenes, valuables had been left completely untouched. It left investigators scratching their heads. That was, until they started receiving new reports about a suspect that they had never considered. That suspect was a tufted capuchin monkey who was spotted by witnesses climbing buildings, running across rooftops, and scaling power lines in the area. Sure enough, when police did a little more searching, they managed to find the mischievous little guy hanging out in a tree. If you're wondering why everyone was so surprised, that's because capuchins are not native to this area. They live in the Amazon, whereas Ica is near the coast, roughly 170 miles south of the capital of Lima. Sadly, it seems that someone was keeping the capuchin as a pet. Based on marks around the animal's waist, police found that suggested it had been tied up. Because the monkey is too domesticated to be released into the wild, officials say it will either stay at the zoo where it was taken following its capture this week, or transferred to an animal sanctuary. A massive Chinese restaurant chain is apologizing to customers and offering substantial refunds and compensation this week, after they were recently the victims of a stomach-churning food tampering crime that went viral across the country's social media. The whole thing began sometime in the early morning hours of February 24th, when two 17-year-old boys, identified only by the names Tang and Wu, went to a Haidilao hot pot location in the city of Shanghai. For those unfamiliar, hot pot is a staple of many East Asian cuisines and consists of one or more communally shared broths at a table. Diners use the flavored broths to cook and eat various ingredients, such as thinly sliced meats, vegetables, rice cakes, noodles, basically whatever you can think of. Anyway, while Tang and Wu were in one of the restaurant chain's private rooms, staff apparently weren't watching as closely as they should have been, because after getting extremely drunk, the teens started peeing in their broth, filming the whole thing, and posting it on social media. As you might imagine, people were extremely grossed out by this, especially when it came to light that Haidilao had no idea what had happened. It wasn't until 4 days later that they became aware of the situation after the disgusting video went viral, and it took them another week to actually figure out which location it had happened at. While broths, utensils, and other equipment are only used by groups of diners at their own table during a given meal, the company couldn't be sure that they had thoroughly disinfected the exact cookware Tang and Wu had peed in. So to try and make it up to horrified customers, Haidilao say that they are now offering full refunds and cash back to more than 4,000 people. The business revealed this week that anyone who ate at this specific location in Shanghai's Huangpu district between February 24th and March 8th is entitled to a refund plus compensation equaling 10 times the amount of whatever their bill was. They also say that they have implemented new safety measures to prevent a situation like this from happening again in the future. That's no small task either. You see, Haidilao operates more than 1,400 restaurants in 15 countries. I have to say, I personally find this to be a relief, as I ate at Haidilao here in Toronto like a month ago. I'm happy to report that I did not notice any notes of piss in my broth, though all the same, it's nice to know steps are being taken to protect diners. All jokes aside, Haidilao is actually a super awesome place, and you should definitely try it if you get the chance. If you do, be sure to try the tableside hand-pulled noodles. It's quite an experience. Anyway, as for Tang and Wu, they were arrested by local police shortly after all of this happened. It's unclear exactly what charges they will be facing, but authorities say that in addition to being held in preventative detention, the teens are also now facing a lawsuit from the hot pot giant. The grand plans of a would-be Thai thief blew up in hilarious and ironic fashion recently after he tried to rob a mall jewelry store dressed in a ridiculous horror movie costume, only to find that he himself was trapped in a different kind of horror movie plot. The whole thing played out sometime last week when the man in question, a 21-year-old identified only by the name Etsara, carried out what he thought would be a big-time heist. After casing the Chiang Mai shopping mall, which was conveniently located near his house, he decided to use what he'd learned to try and burglarize a gold shop there. On the day in question, Etsara traveled to the mall, arriving there around 5 p.m. He then hid in a bathroom until the building closed for the night. Oh yeah, he also dressed head to toe in a Scream Halloween costume to conceal his identity. Once he was satisfied that everyone had gone home for the night, Etsara emerged from the bathroom wearing his ridiculous disguise. Armed with a crowbar, he then headed to the gold shop and forced his way in, ready for his big score. Unfortunately for the 21-year-old, the people that owned the business weren't born yesterday. They didn't just leave their valuables out on the display shelves overnight. They had all been packed away into the store's safe, a safe that was more than sturdy enough to resist Etsara's crowbar. After failing to pry open the safe, Etsara gave up, left the store, and began trying to find an exit from the mall. However, this is when he realized he was truly screwed. You see, the mall's exits were all well secured, and there was no way out. After wandering the halls for several hours, the 21-year-old apparently returned to the gold shop, seemingly resigned to his fate. He waited there, hiding behind the counter until morning, when staff arrived, promptly realized what was going on, and trapped him in there all over again. Etsada was arrested a short time later. While the whole thing is pretty stupid, according to reports, Etsada was quite apologetic and admitted to what he had done right away. And unlike in many of these kinds of stories that we cover, at the very least, it seems that if he had been successful in his robbery, he was planning to put the proceeds to good use. The 21-year-old told police, quote, "I needed money to study for a bachelor's degree at a state university in Chiang Mai. I apologize to my parents for my rash act." At the time of this recording, it's unclear if he is yet facing formal charges. Japan has often been referred to as the land of the rising sun. However, according to government officials, 2 of its citizens were recently arrested during an overseas trip to China after they became the givers of the full moon instead. The whole thing reportedly began back on January 3rd when the tourists in question, an unidentified man and woman in their 20s, were traveling through Beijing. While exploring the capital, they decided to follow in the footsteps of countless tourists before them and headed out on a tour of the Great Wall. However, that's where things took a bizarre turn. While taking some photos, the couple thought it would be funny to snap a few with the man's bare ass hanging out in the foreground. This was quickly noticed by security personnel, who apparently didn't take kindly to what they saw as the man and woman desecrating a World Heritage Site. As a result, the pair were arrested on the spot. They were held for 2 weeks before being deported back to Japan. While the couple told officials back at the Japanese embassy that the whole thing was meant to be a prank, that's definitely not how the Chinese public took it. As you might imagine, there are more than a few lingering resentments there, in large part due to Japan's colonial history in China. To give you an idea, after news broke about the January incident, a hashtag began trending on the Chinese social media platform Weibo that translated to, quote, "Japanese man and woman detained for indecent behavior at the Great Wall." Within just hours, that hashtag had been viewed more than 60 million times. At the time of this recording, it appears nothing else is being done about the strange diplomatic incident. Well, folks, another Easter is right around the corner, and as we all know, that can only mean one thing. Hide your Cadbury cream eggs, because people are apparently out here trying to steal them. Don't believe me? Just ask representatives from England's Cambridgeshire Police, who put out an equally strange and amusing bit of body cam footage this week showing the arrest of a man absolutely loaded down with the iconic chocolate eggs. The whole thing started shortly after 11:30 a.m. on March 22nd, when the suspect, later identified as 26-year-old Dean DeGroot, walked into a Tesco Express convenience store in the city of Peterborough. From the sounds of it, DeGroot didn't even try to pretend he was a customer. Instead, he just began grabbing box after box of Cadbury cream eggs from the store's shelves and shoving them into a duffel bag. After allegedly stealing more than 220 pounds, or about $280 worth of the eggs, he then took off without paying. A member of staff attempted to chase DeGroot, but ended up getting lucky when they were able to flag down a passing police car. The officers followed the 26-year-old, who they were able to catch a short distance away. Though he had apparently abandoned his duffel bag by this time, he wasn't exactly inconspicuous. You see, he still had a ton of the stolen cream eggs stuffed into his jacket, leading to this bizarre exchange.
So we're gonna fall out. Is that? I must. Oh, they didn't light this up.
DeGroot quickly admitted to what he had done after his arrest, and this week was sentenced to 12 weeks in prison. Though that sentence was suspended for a year, the 26-year-old was also banned by the judge in the case from entering the entire county of Cambridgeshire for the next 3 months. Not sure how they're planning to enforce that, but all the same, it seems the county's cream eggs are a little bit safer, at least for now. Authorities in the Indian capital territory of Delhi released a bizarre update to the public this week, announcing that they had arrested a notorious small-time criminal with quite the nauseating MO. According to reports, for some time, the 27-year-old suspect, whose name is Deepak, has been terrorizing the streets of Delhi. Police say he has been involved in everything from pickpocketing to armed muggings and robberies. However, that's not what he's best known for. You see, while authorities have apparently been aware of Deepak's crimes for quite a while, they hadn't actually been able to get him to face justice for an incredibly strange reason. That reason is that every time police had previously caught him, he deliberately soiled himself to avoid arrest. Seriously, I'm not joking. The man's MO is to shit his pants whenever he's caught, creating an unbearable stench and dissuading officers from taking him into custody. Police even nicknamed him Potty Badmash. Just in case you're wondering, badmash is reportedly a term in India that means ruffian or miscreant. I personally think they missed out by not calling him the poopy pickpocket, but hey, that's just me. Anyway, Deepak's stealing and shitting spree apparently worked numerous times, but on March 24th, Delhi police finally turned the tables. After spotting Deepak up to his usual tricks, they came prepared with masks, gloves, and other personal protective equipment, and successfully took him into custody. At the time of Deepak's arrest, police found a knife on him, which he apparently tried to claim was simply his lucky charm. However, once he was down at the station, he reportedly confessed to a number of robbery and theft-related crimes. Police say more than half a dozen cases are now pending against him in areas all across the capital. Officials in India say that a 24-year-old American man is looking at some serious jail time this week after he completely ignored and violated countless laws surrounding the protection of an isolated indigenous tribe in order to make content for his YouTube channel. The man in question, 24-year-old Mikhailo Polyakov, reportedly traveled to India's Andaman and Nicobar Islands near the end of March of this year. The island chain is quite remote and is located in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And while the area is a major hub for tourism, one of the parts of the archipelago is completely off limits. You might have heard of it before. It's called North Sentinel Island. For those that are unfamiliar, a little bit of background. North Sentinel Island is home to one of the last remaining so-called uncontacted indigenous tribes in the world. The North Sentinelese, who are believed to number between 150 and 200 people, have no communication with the outside and have lived on their island for thousands of years. On the few occasions that people have tried to interact with them, the tribe has made their thoughts on the matter incredibly clear. They've attacked basically every person, aircraft, or vessel that has tried to approach them. As a result, over several decades, the Indian government has taken steps to protect their way of life. Travel of any kind to the island is completely forbidden, and in fact, it's illegal to go within 3 miles of North Sentinel. That being said, I'm sure many of you can already see where this is going. Indian officials allege that Polyakov traveled to the Andaman Islands for the express purpose of flouting all of these rules and protections, and he apparently did it to make content for his YouTube channel, where he goes by the name Neo-Orientalist. According to reports, after arriving on a neighboring island in the capital of Port Blair, Polyakov got together a bunch of supplies. These included a gray inflatable Gemini boat, fuel, binoculars, and of course, a GoPro camera. Sources seem to differ on exactly when the 24-year-old set sail, but most media reports we came across state that he left in the early hours of March 29th. Heading out under the cover of darkness, he began the 25-mile voyage from where he cast off on Kurmadera Beach. Upon making it to North Sentinel around 10 a.m., Polyakov reportedly began scoping out the island with his binoculars. He then started blowing a whistle to attract the attention of the tribe. During this time, he also began filming. While it appears that footage has not been released, in the recording he could allegedly be heard saying, quote, "That is it. The last uncontacted tribe, the last mystery. If they see me, will they attack or will they accept me?" After apparently blowing his whistle for over an hour straight, the 24-year-old went ashore. He was carrying a coconut and a can of Diet Coke, which he brought for the North Sentinelese in what he later described as a peace offering. For several minutes, he filmed more footage of himself as he collected sand samples. He then left the coconut and can of pop on the shore before heading back to the main Andaman Islands. Unfortunately for Polyakov, though, as he returned, he was spotted by fishermen who quickly figured out what he had been up to and alerted police. The 24-year-old was arrested on March 31st, 2 days after illegally traveling to North Sentinel. As you might imagine, Indian officials were not impressed by Polyakov's stunt, especially when they learned that he had already been in trouble before for illegally filming and harassing other indigenous tribes. Not only that, but he'd allegedly been caught on at least 2 prior occasions over the past several months where he'd previously attempted to get to North Sentinel Island. While Polyakov referred to himself as a thrill seeker following his arrest, many others are now calling him something else. In short, an idiot. This includes the director of an indigenous rights group called Survival International, who said in a statement after news of the story broke this week, quote, "It beggars belief that someone could be that reckless and idiotic. This person's actions not only endangered his own life, they put the lives of the entire Sentinelese tribe at risk. It's very well known by now that uncontacted peoples have no immunity to common outside diseases like flu or measles, which could completely wipe them out." That last bit is a real concern, as Indian officials have stated that they have not been able to recover the Diet Coke and other items Polyakov brought to the island, and they probably won't, so they simply have to hope that no disease spreads as a result of the 24-year-old's actions. What's perhaps equally as crazy is it seems Polyakov has no appreciation for just how lucky he was. One of the last people to do something similar, who also happened to be an American, was a Christian missionary named John Allen Chow. In 2018, Chow went to the island to try and convert the North Sentinelese to Christianity. That trip ended with Chow being killed in a hail of arrows and his body being dragged into the jungle by several of the tribe members. His remains were never recovered. At the time of this recording, Mikhailo Polyakov remains in custody in India. It's not clear exactly what officials are planning to do from here, but it's been reported that if they decide to pursue charges, he could be looking at up to 5 years in prison. Authorities in the Indian state of Maharashtra say that they received a major and unexpected helping hand in a recent robbery investigation when an unusual piece of evidence turned out to be the key to the entire case. The whole thing began sometime on March 28th, when the 30-year-old victim, Boru Benar, was in the middle of his workday. He was traveling in a van and doing some routine deliveries in the town of Palgar with his driver, when suddenly they were flagged down by 3 men. The men looked like they were trying to sort out something with a motorcycle that had broken down and asked for help. Evidently, wanting to be a good person, Boru told his driver to pull over so they could lend some assistance. Unfortunately, what he didn't know was that they had just fallen into a trap. Before Boru and his driver knew it, they had been attacked by the 3 men, who disabled them by throwing chili powder into their eyes. As they stumbled around, temporarily blinded and in pain, the thieves stole more than 685,000 rupees in cash, the equivalent of about $8,000 US. After threatening the victims, the gang took off on their motorcycle, which turned out to be quite functional. When police began investigating, understandably, Boru and the driver didn't have very much information to give them. They didn't know the men that had attacked them, and it had all happened so fast. However, that's when authorities caught a lucky break. You see, the thieves had carried the chili powder used in the crime in a folded-up wedding invitation. When police looked into the names on the card, it led them straight to one of the suspects, 23-year-old Kiran Lamte. It seems that Lamte quickly gave up his accomplices, allowing police to arrest 3 other people. 2 of them were the ones that apparently carried out the actual robbery with Lamte, while the final man was the alleged mastermind. It turned out it was Boru's own brother, 34-year-old Datu Benar. In addition to arresting all of those involved, police say that they were also able to recover all of the stolen cash. I'm not sure what it is this week with Indian thieves using strange powders to commit robberies, but we've got another couple of geniuses for you in this next story who also apparently went to the Wile E. Coyote School of Crime. The whole thing began on March 20th when police in the city of Bhubaneswar began receiving reports of chain snatchings. The crimes took place in at least 6 separate locations in and around the city, with victims having their gold valuables ripped right from their necks. Now, on its own, this wouldn't really be news. If you've been tuning into this series for a while now, then you likely know that these kinds of street robberies happen all too often all over India, with thieves regularly targeting gold jewelry like necklaces, bracelets, and anklets. However, what made these crimes unique was that they included an extra and arguably very unnecessary step. In each case, the culprits had sprayed the victims with some kind of itching powder or liquid. Evidently, this was done to distract the victims right before the robberies, and I suppose it could be argued that the tactic technically worked since the criminals managed to get away. However, these crimes are generally the type of thing that happen in the blink of an eye, so if you ask me, it's debatable at best whether the itching powder really came in all that clutch here. Anyway, while the 2 suspects, 30-year-old Sonu Yadav and 27-year-old Manish Yadav, managed to get away, police were able to identify them after launching an investigation. And on April 3rd, the pair were located in an area called Badagada. Unfortunately, things got decidedly less funny when the men were confronted, as they reportedly pulled guns on police, leading to a shootout. Thankfully, it appears that the suspects were the only ones that were injured, though, as they were both shot in the legs before being taken into custody. According to police, Sonu and Manish were planning to commit more robberies prior to their arrests. They are expected to face formal charges once they are released from a local hospital. A Brazilian woman's frustration about stolen food turned to shock and disbelief this week after she took steps to get to the bottom of the situation and learned the surprising identity of the culprits responsible. According to local media sources, the whole thing began recently when the woman in question, Sandra Maria, realized that bread was being stolen from her home every morning in the rural community of Boa Viagem. For a little context, in many places in Brazil, local bakeries will make daily deliveries to residents so that they can have fresh bread and other items. These deliveries are usually made early in the morning, but for some reason, Sandra wasn't getting hers. At first, she took this up with the bakery, but they insisted the deliveries were being made as usual. In other words, someone was taking the bread after it had already arrived. Confused and annoyed, Sandra decided that she was going to catch whoever was responsible in the act. After purchasing some surveillance cameras, she set them up outside, positioning them right where her bread was usually dropped off. However, when she checked the footage, it wasn't at all what she expected. As you can see, the culprit wasn't a group of thieves or some spiteful neighbors. It was a gang of goats, 4 of them to be specific. The wild animals had learned that if they went to Sandra's door in the mornings, there would be a tasty bread feast waiting for them. What's equally as amusing as the revelation itself is how the goats carried out the bread theft. In the footage, one of the goats can be seen ripping the bakery bag open before throwing out individual pieces so that the others can get in on the action. Unfortunately, reports don't mention what Sandra did after uncovering the truth about the strange situation, though I think it's safe to assume she probably made other arrangements with the bakery. If so, sadly that means the gang of goats will have to look elsewhere for their next free meal. Authorities in Taiwan say that what started out as a serious investigation this week into a potential shooting transformed into something a lot stranger after the alleged culprit was tracked down and explained the real reason for his actions. The whole thing began on April 17th, when police in Hualien County received a call from a worried resident by the last name of Lo. Lo said that he'd made an alarming discovery. He was pretty sure someone had been shooting at his home in Ji'an Township. When officers arrived, Lo showed them the evidence for his claims. 2 of his pet pigeons had been hit and killed by some type of projectile. Surveillance camera footage confirmed this. It showed a man who appeared to be armed with a rifle shooting in the direction of the 70-year-old's house. While this was understandably concerning, things took a turn after police tracked down the alleged shooter, another local resident in his 70s, by the last name of Lin. That's when Lin explained what he had really been doing that day. According to him, he had no grudge against Lo or any of his other neighbors for that matter. Instead, he said that the pigeons were his intended targets all along. He wanted to kill the birds so that he could eat them. Lin said he shot the pigeons after they had been released from Lo's enclosure and were perched on a telephone pole outside his house. But after being hit, the birds had fallen onto Lo's roof, so there was no way for him to retrieve them. After that, he just gave up and went home. Though Lin's weapon was just an air rifle and was totally legal, needless to say, authorities were not impressed with how he'd used the gun, or the fact that he'd done so in such a reckless way. As a result, he was arrested for public endangerment and causing property damage. Authorities in the Thai province of Chiang Mai say that a man was detained, mostly for his own safety, last week, after he caused concern among the residents of a local village by walking around with weapons and claiming to be a mythical creature. The whole thing unfolded sometime on April 26th, when police in Lienchiang district received calls from several worried people. They said that there was a man exhibiting signs of mental illness who was going around carrying knives and saying that he was some kind of serpent deity. When police arrived at the scene, they found the man in question, identified only as a 43-year-old from a completely different province, hiding out in a hut on the outskirts of the area. It didn't take long for officers to see what the villagers had been talking about. Not only was the man in possession of a bag full of knives, he was bought all the way in on this mythical serpent delusion. As they tried to talk to him, he repeatedly stuck his tongue in and out of his mouth and began chanting in what he claimed was a snake language. Due to the man's erratic behavior, officers weren't able to approach him right away, but eventually they came up with a clever solution. After pretending to create some holy water, they gave it to the 43-year-old to drink. This apparently worked and caused him to calm down enough that he could be taken for a medical evaluation. In the end, no charges were filed, and police were able to make contact with some of the man's relatives so that he could receive further treatment. Officials from the Japanese Environment Ministry say that 3 Chinese nationals were arrested in connection with a bizarre animal smuggling case last week after they allegedly planned to leave the country with a giant haul of protected crabs. The whole thing began sometime on the afternoon of May 6th, when the men in question, 24-year-old Liao Zhibin, 26-year-old Song Zhanhao, and 27-year-old Guo Jiawei, were staying at a hotel in the Japanese city of Amami. For those unfamiliar, Amami is also the name of the island chain that the city belongs to. The Amami Islands are part of Japan's larger Ryukyu archipelago, which includes more well-known islands such as Okinawa. Because they're quite a bit further south than the Japanese main islands, they're also subtropical, meaning they're home to some of the most unique species in the country as well. Species such as the Amami hermit crab, which are not only legally protected, but considered to be national natural monuments. As a result, they are often the targets of poachers who know that they can sell them for upwards of 20,000 yen each, the equivalent of about $135 US. Yeah, you can see where this is going. According to reports, that afternoon, the men asked hotel staff to take care of their luggage for a bit while they briefly went out to do some other things. This seemed like a fairly normal request. That was, until hotel employees thought they heard rustling sounds coming from inside the bags. When they opened them up, they discovered they were absolutely jam-packed with hundreds upon hundreds of hermit crabs. 95 kilograms worth, to be exact. When the men returned, police were waiting for them after they were contacted by the employees. It turned out that there were 3 more suitcases with another 65 kilograms of hermit crabs in them on top of what they'd already found. For those of you paying attention at home, that's 160 kilos, or more than 350 pounds of hermit crabs. While the men were immediately arrested, and it's been widely speculated that they were smuggling the crabs to sell, it seems police are keeping a more open mind. In a statement, they told reporters, quote, "Our investigation is ongoing to identify whether they had the crabs to sell them, to keep them as pets, or to eat them. We are reviewing all possibilities." A 45-year-old Taiwanese man is reportedly facing charges in connection with an equally bizarre and disturbing incident last week after he allegedly threatened several people with a chainsaw during a freakout at a convenience store. The whole thing began sometime on the afternoon of May 14th, when the man in question, identified only by the last name of Xiao, went into the store on Zhongzheng Road. While inside, he reportedly picked up a pair of earbuds, opening them while he took them to the front counter. While in line, though, Xiao apparently decided that he no longer wanted the earphones, despite the fact that they were now fully out of their packaging. This obviously annoyed the staff there and led to 2 other customers confronting Xiao about this behavior. That's when things really started to go off the rails. According to police, the confrontation between Xiao and the other customers started as an argument, but quickly escalated to pushing and shoving. And while it initially seemed like the altercation had ended when Xiao left the store, it turned out he was actually just grabbing a chainsaw from his vehicle. When he returned moments later, he allegedly began waving it around and threatening people. Thankfully, though, before things turned into a potential tragedy, the 45-year-old was tackled by a couple of other bystanders. They managed to hold him until police could arrive. As for what triggered Xiao's violent meltdown, police say they have an idea. During his arrest, 2.8 grams of heroin and 1.3 grams of amphetamines were found in his possession, as well as a pipe. The 45-year-old is now being investigated for drug possession, as well as attempted murder. A pair of would-be burglars evidently got way more than they bargained for when they broke into a Japanese pawn shop last week, after what started out as a simple smash-and-grab robbery turned into a floundering struggle to escape, thanks to the brave and decisive actions of the store's married owners. It all started at around 2 o'clock in the morning on May 16th at the Ginpodo pawn shop in the city of Kumagaya. The owners of the business were asleep in bed inside their home on the building's second floor when suddenly the 63-year-old husband was awoken by loud noises coming from downstairs. Now, apparently, the couple owned quite a few cats, so initially the man thought that some of them were simply acting up and getting into fights. However, when he went to check, he quickly realized it was a lot more serious. As he made his way down to the first floor, he discovered 2 men robbing his shop. They had forcibly pushed up the metal shutters covering the storefront and had smashed their way through a glass door with a crowbar. At this point, they were stuffing items from one of his display cases into a sack. Despite how terrifying this must have been, the 63-year-old immediately sprung into action. He grabbed a golf club and ran towards the burglars, swinging. He later told reporters, quote, "I couldn't let them get away, so I gave them a bit of a fight." If anything, that's an understatement, though. When the suspects saw him coming, they ran to their getaway car out front, but the store owner refused to give up. Instead, he began repeatedly smashing the windshield of their vehicle with the golf club, his goal being to create as many cracks as possible to obstruct their view. It turned out that the man's wife wasn't far behind. During the commotion, she grabbed her own weapon, a can of insecticide, and before the 2 suspects could react, she'd started spraying the bug killer through the open driver's side window. The burglars did quickly roll up the window, but it wasn't long before the couple outsmarted them again. By this point, the husband had fully made his way through part of the windshield with his golf club. So after getting his wife to pass him the can of insecticide, he started spraying it in through this new opening. Eventually, the suspects realized that they were trapped. They couldn't drive off because they could no longer see through the windshield of their car, but they couldn't stay put either because the vehicle's interior was quickly filling up with poisonous fumes. Left with no other choice, they ran off on foot, leaving all of their stolen loot behind. According to police, one of the suspects, a 69-year-old man, has since been arrested. Authorities are still searching for his accomplice, but they say they believe they know his identity. Representatives from Japan's Nagasaki Prefectural Police say that they recently found themselves in quite the strange situation after they investigated a high-speed car chase, only to realize that the perpetrator was one of their own officers. The whole thing began sometime back in February when some officers from the department were on patrol on a local highway. The speed limit on that section of road was 50 kilometers per hour. So imagine their surprise when a car brazenly whipped past them going more than double that. The officers in marked patrol cars initiated a chase. However, the driver refused to stop. And much to their chagrin, they soon lost the speeding motorist altogether. The only saving grace was that one of the officers managed to catch the suspect's license plate before they got away. However, little did they know there was another surprise waiting for them. When they ran the plate numbers, it turned out that the vehicle belonged to one of their fellow officers, a woman in her 20s who was off duty at the time. And when they reviewed further surveillance camera footage from the area that day, it showed that she had committed at least 13 other Road Traffic Act violations, including running red lights. When confronted, the female officer apparently claimed that she was returning home from visiting her parents during the holidays and that she was tired. She told her superiors, quote, "I didn't notice the patrol car chasing me. I just wanted to get home and get some sleep." Of course, it was a little hard to believe that someone wouldn't have noticed sirens and loudspeakers behind them while driving, least of all a police officer. So after further investigation, the woman was hit with several charges and handed a 6-month, 10% pay cut. According to the Nagasaki Prefectural Police, she ended up resigning on May 1st. Despite this, many online in Japan seem to be split over what happened here. Some suggested that the female officer might have been hiding more about what she was doing that day, while others simply joked that the police department had lost a good driver. Authorities in the South Korean capital of Seoul say that it's a miracle no one was seriously hurt or killed this week, after a disgruntled man allegedly carried out a disturbing arson attack on a commuter train, later offering a ridiculous excuse for his actions. The whole thing began shortly before 8:45 a.m. on May 31st aboard a Seoul Metro Line 5 train. The train was reportedly traveling between Yaoinaru and Mappo stations when suddenly smoke and flames began pouring out from inside. It's now alleged that moments earlier, a man in his 60s deliberately set one of the passenger carriages on fire. The man had previously boarded the train with a lighter, gasoline, and a bunch of clothing. After dousing the garments in the fuel, he began lighting them on fire. While all of this was understandably terrifying for riders, especially as parts of the train filled up with smoke, the situation was quickly brought under control thanks to the brave and decisive actions of both passengers and staff. Several people worked together and used fire extinguishers to stop the flames from spreading, while hundreds of passengers calmly evacuated the train through an adjoining tunnel. Even so, when emergency responders arrived, nearly 24 people had to be hospitalized for smoke inhalation, and a further 129 received minor treatment at the scene. One of those who was hospitalized was the suspect, identified only by the last name Juan. According to police, it was easy to figure out who was responsible because Juan's hands were covered in soot from the fire. In terms of the motive behind the crime, apparently Juan was fairly forthcoming with investigators. During questioning, he reportedly told them that he carried out the unhinged arson because he was angry about the outcome of a recent court battle with his ex-wife. He felt that he had been required to pay too much in alimony, and as a result, had decided to take out his anger on innocent people. As if that wasn't bad enough, it seems Juan showed little to no remorse for his alleged actions. A witness told police that when he confronted Juan at the scene, his response was, quote, "Well, no one died, so what's the problem?" At the time of this recording, Juan remains in custody and formal charges are expected to follow. Authorities in the Chinese province of Shanxi say that they are investigating a strange and shocking incident this week after a man's unexpected episode left exhibits damaged at one of the country's most well-known historic sites. According to local media, the whole thing took place on the afternoon of May 31st at a museum in the city of Xi'an. The museum is built around the tomb of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. The sprawling site contains many notable historic elements, but is perhaps best known as the home of the Terracotta Army. These are the iconic life-size terracotta soldiers created more than 2,000 years ago to guard the tomb of the emperor. As you might imagine, it's one of China's most celebrated archaeological treasures, which is why what happened this week is so crazy. At around 5:30 p.m. that day, the museum was busy with its usual crowds of tourists when suddenly a man, identified as a 30-year-old by the last name of Sun, climbed the fence surrounding the exhibit and jumped over the netting into the pit below. This was already pretty wild, considering the pit is up to 18 feet deep in some sections. However, that's nothing compared to what happened next. Authorities say that after landing on the ground, Sun began wrestling with the nearby terracotta warriors, pushing and pulling on them. The 30-year-old was quickly restrained by security personnel, though not before causing damage to at least two of the iconic figures. As for what was going through Sun's head at the time, that has yet to be determined, though police say they believe Sun suffers from some kind of mental illness. As a result, despite the seriousness of the situation, it's not clear if he will actually be facing any legal consequences connected to the dramatic incident. Authorities in the Japanese city of Osaka say that a prolific pervert was recently arrested after he was caught in the act by a concerned citizen, only for police to learn that this was only the tip of the iceberg. According to reports, the whole thing started around 8 p.m. on May 8th, when the Good Samaritan in question noticed a middle-aged man behaving strangely at a laundromat in Miyakojima Ward. The man, later identified as 44-year-old Mitsuru Toyonaga, was skulking around a section of dryers and was apparently looking so shady that this member of the public decided to perform a citizen's arrest. As bold as this might seem, it turned out that the Good Samaritan's instincts were right on the money, because when police arrived, Toyonaga reportedly launched into a wild confession. Not only did he admit that he was at the laundromat that evening trying to steal women's underwear, this was far from his first offense. In fact, he told officers he'd done this at least 100 times since September of last year. Well, even this ended up being a conservative estimate, because when police actually went to Toyonaga's house to investigate, they found more than 4 times that amount. At least 450 pairs of women's panties were recovered from his place, all arranged by color in a special dresser. So far, it appears that Toyonaga has only been arrested on suspicion of stealing 4 pairs of underwear, though understandably that could change considering this massive haul. For now, though, it appears the ladies of Osaka can breathe a little easier knowing there's one less pervert out there with his eyes on their unmentionables. Authorities in South Korea's Gangwon province say that a woman was slapped with a hefty fine this week, nearly a year after a workplace incident she allegedly intended to be a prank ended with the humiliation of one of her young male colleagues. The whole thing happened sometime on October 3rd, 2024, when the woman and the male victim, who is said to be in his 20s, were both working in the kitchen of a restaurant in the city of Wonju. It's unclear exactly how the incident began, but we do know how it ended. Thinking it would be funny to pants the young man, the woman grabbed his trousers and pulled. The problem was his underwear went with them, leaving him standing there with everything hanging out in front of all of his coworkers. While the woman said that she intended the whole thing to be a funny prank and apologized profusely, authorities did not see it the same way when they learned about what had happened. They felt that she had intentionally sexually humiliated the male victim and charged her with an indecent act by compulsion. The case finally wrapped up in court this week, with the judge siding with police and prosecutors. The woman was fined the equivalent of about $2,100 US and was also ordered to undergo 8 hours of sexual violence prevention education. When news of this broke online, as you might imagine, it left the internet divided. Some felt the fine was excessive, especially since the woman had no previous criminal record and was apologetic throughout the ordeal. However, others felt that the whole idea that this was a prank in the first place was part of the problem, particularly because the woman is not some naive teenager or something. She's in her 50s. Anyway, we mainly included this one because it's been a pretty heavy week, and we felt like closing things out with something a little more on the ridiculous side. Be sure to also share your thoughts about this one in the comments below. Police in the Thai capital of Bangkok say that a man is lucky to be alive after a dispute at a restaurant turned violent, and his survival may have come down to a small Buddhist amulet hanging around his neck. The whole thing began on June 12th at a restaurant in Bangkok's Bangkhan district. There, 50-year-old Thai businessman Pornchai was seated at table number 35, enjoying a meal with friends and colleagues. According to witnesses, Pornchai and a 28-year-old man, known only by his nickname O, became embroiled in an argument over a real estate bidding project. The two men reportedly disagreed over the financial benefits of the deal, and what started out as a heated discussion quickly escalated into something far more dangerous. As the dispute intensified, O allegedly pulled out a firearm and shot Pornchai in the chest, striking him on the left side. But what happened next surprised everyone, including police. The bullet struck the Buddhist amulet that Pornchai had been wearing, absorbing the force of the shot and preventing it from entering his body. Although Pornchai was still injured in the incident, the amulet, featuring the image of a revered deceased abbot, likely saved his life. Immediately after the shooting, Oh fled the scene in a white pickup truck as chaos erupted inside the restaurant. Customers ran in panic, overturning tables and chairs in their rush to escape. Some tables were left stained with blood, and a window behind table 35 was shattered from the gunfire. 2 bullet casings were later recovered near the scene. Officers from the Bangkan police station responded to reports of gunfire and arrived to find the overturned furniture, shattered glass, and damaged amulet with the bullet still lodged inside. The restaurant's owner, a man named Prasit, told authorities that many customers fled without paying their bills in the panic, something he said he understood, but he hoped they would eventually return to settle up. A restaurant employee told police that Pornchai and his business partners were regulars at the venue, often meeting there to discuss property deals, including apparently the one that led to this violent encounter. As for Oh, the suspected gunman, police say he later surrendered himself to authorities at the Bangkan police station. He remains in custody as the investigation continues. As a side note, in Thai culture, Buddhist amulets like the one Pornchai was wearing are believed to offer protection to their owners. One well-known story even tells of rival gangster groups who ceased fighting altogether after discovering that both sides were carrying identical amulets. While this incident ended in gunfire rather than peace, authorities and locals alike are crediting the small charm with preventing what could have been a fatal tragedy. At the time of this recording, Pornchai is reportedly recovering from his injuries. Police have not yet confirmed whether charges have been formally filed against Oh. Authorities in the South Korean province of South Jeolla say that a man is in custody this week after he allegedly went to extreme lengths to express his displeasure with his local police department over a series of traffic violations. The suspect, identified only as a man in his 40s, apparently became enraged after being repeatedly caught and fined by speeding cameras in the city of Suncheon. According to reports, he had been cited 36 times since 2021, with 12 of those incidents taking place this year alone. But a recent ticket seems to have finally pushed him over the edge. After deciding that the local police department was to blame, the man showed up at the Suncheon police station on the evening of June 23rd. Upon arriving just after 8:20 p.m., he promptly drove his SUV through the building's front entrance, shattering 2 sets of glass doors before hitting an interior wall and coming to a stop in the lobby. Thankfully, no one was standing in the way of the vehicle at the time, though obviously the suspect had no way of knowing that. He was immediately taken into custody at the scene, and authorities say he is being investigated on charges of unlawful entry into a government facility and destruction of public property. In a report this week, Suncheon police say that the man was not under the influence of drugs or alcohol at the time and estimated the damage to their station at 10 million won, or about $7,200 US. Currently, the irate driver remains in custody. Authorities in Japan say that a man has been arrested after allegedly stealing more than 40 bicycles, all in the hopes of creating what he called the perfect bike. According to reports, the strange case came to light back on April 2nd, during what was supposed to be a routine street stop. Police in the city of Niigata say that they approached a 51-year-old man as part of a standard patrol check, but when they ran the registration number on the bicycle he was riding, they discovered it had been reported stolen. That discovery led to a search of the man's home, and what police found there quickly turned the case from petty theft to something a lot more complicated. Inside the suspect's residence, officers uncovered more than 50 additional bicycles, some with clear signs of damage to their locks. In total, the stash was reportedly valued at over 1 million yen, or about $7,000 US. During questioning, the man admitted to stealing at least 42 bikes over a 4-year span. He told police his goal had been to gather parts from different models in order to build one custom bicycle tailored to his ideal specifications. Initially, the man claimed he only took bikes that had been left unlocked, but investigators say that evidence recovered at the scene suggests otherwise. Several of the recovered bicycles appeared to have been forcibly taken. What was weirder is that despite the man's claims of wanting to make some sort of superbike, most of the stolen bicycles were still intact, suggesting he never actually started his bizarre project. The case has drawn mixed reactions from the public. Some locals have expressed a strange kind of sympathy for the man's passion, while others have pointed out that it caused major disruption for everyday residents who had their bikes stolen over the past several years. At the time of this recording, police say they're continuing to investigate and working to return as many of the recovered bicycles to their rightful owners as possible. So far, no additional suspects have been identified. A bizarre early morning robbery involving a garbage bag, a knife, and a stolen taxi sent Hong Kong police scrambling last Friday, and has now ended with one man in custody. According to investigators, the whole thing began just after 2 a.m. on June 27th, when a man entered a convenience store in the New Territories district of Hung Shoi Kyu. He was wearing black clothes and had draped a black garbage bag over his head and upper body. Not exactly high-tech camouflage, but effective enough to conceal his identity, at least for a little while. Inside the store, the suspect, described as a slim 40-year-old South Asian man, allegedly pulled out a roughly 10-inch long kitchen knife and threatened the 52-year-old female cashier. Frightened, she handed over 1,500 Hong Kong dollars in cash, about $200 USD, along with 7 packs of cigarettes. The suspect didn't stop there, though. Upon leaving the store, he reportedly made his way to the nearby Hung Shoi Kyu light rail station, where he flagged down a taxi. After climbing in and instructing the driver to head toward Yuen Long, the situation took another sharp turn. When they reached Long Tin Road, the suspect allegedly pulled out the knife again, this time turning it on the 44-year-old male taxi driver. He ordered the man out of the vehicle and then drove off in the stolen cab. According to police, he also took the driver's phone, tablet, the equivalent of about $430 US, and, for some reason, a towel. Thankfully, neither victim was physically harmed during the ordeal. And while it's not every day someone commits an armed robbery wearing literal trash, police weren't about to let the man get away. A search operation was quickly launched. After combing through a mountain of CCTV footage, officers located the stolen taxi parked in Yuen district. Just before 10 a.m., roughly 8 hours after the initial robbery, the suspect was arrested nearby. He was reportedly still in possession of several stolen items, including the cigarettes, 5,000 Hong Kong dollars in cash, and, again, the cab driver's towel. Officers also discovered that he did not have a valid driver's license or insurance. The man is now facing a series of charges, including robbery and driving without a license. At the time of this recording, the suspect remains in custody as police continue their investigation. I gotta say, folks, every time I think I've heard it all before, this series always finds a way to surprise me. Authorities in the South Korean city of Gumi say that a local man is in custody this week after he was busted for a DUI, then allegedly tried to beat the offense by drinking even more alcohol. The whole thing began at around 3:35 a.m. on June 29th, when the suspect in question, a man in his 40s identified only by the letter B, was spotted driving erratically in the city's Gyeongguk-dong area. Suspecting he was under the influence, police were called to the scene. However, when they arrived, they got quite the annoying surprise. In the time that it had taken them to respond, the man had gone to a local store where he purchased and consumed additional alcohol. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, what an idiot. Now he looks even more guilty. But there's actually a reason he likely did this. The way DUI cases reportedly work in South Korea is that a lot of the burden is placed on police to prove an accused person's level of intoxication at the time of the offense. This is usually done with standard breathalyzer testing. But there's a catch. If you drink more before police can conduct the test, well, then they can't say with certainty how drunk you were, or even if you were drunk at the time of the alleged DUI. This sounds incredibly silly, and it is, but this fighting fire with fire approach has apparently been a problem for authorities for some time, and according to reports, the tactic, known as alcohol stacking, has gotten plenty of cases thrown out of court in favor of the defendants. Unfortunately for the man in this case, though, it seems he won't be so lucky. You see, this area of the law was recently amended following a high-profile case involving a well-known musician named Kim Ho-jung. Kim was sentenced last month to prison time following a particularly bad example of one of these types of cases. And as of June 4th, under the country's revised Road Traffic Act, attempting to obstruct a sobriety test can now result in significant penalties. It appears that B was unaware of this and straight up admitted to police what he had been trying to do during questioning. He was booked for attempting to obstruct a DUI investigation, and if charged and convicted, is now looking at a sentence of between 1 to 5 years in prison, plus a fine up to the equivalent of $14,500 US. On top of this, his driver's license is subject to cancellation. I guess you could argue, in the end, he was an idiot after all. Shocking footage has emerged out of Pakistan this week after a pet lion escaped from a home and launched a terrifying attack on a woman and her 2 young children, an incident that has since led to arrests, outrage, and a wider crackdown on illegal big cat ownership. The ordeal unfolded on Thursday, July 3rd, in Lahore's Johar town neighborhood. Dramatic CCTV footage shows the lion leaping effortlessly over a concrete wall, pouncing on a woman from behind and knocking her to the ground. As terrified onlookers scatter, a man can be seen running out of the property the lion escaped from, waving an object and managing to chase the animal away. But the nightmare didn't end there. The lion then bolted further down the street where it attacked the initial victim's 2 young children, ages 5 and 7. All 3 sustained injuries to their faces and arms and were rushed to a local hospital. Thankfully, authorities later confirmed they are now in stable condition. In the chaos, the lion's owners managed to recapture the animal and loaded it into a vehicle before going into hiding in another district. But police tracked them down quickly. On Friday morning, July 4th, Lahore police announced that 3 people had been arrested in connection with the incident. The lion was also seized and transferred to local wildlife authorities. According to police, the animal escaped from an open cage at the property where the incident took place. In case you're wondering, yes, it is legal to own a variety of big cats in Pakistan, including lions, cheetahs, tigers, pumas, and jaguars. And from the sounds of it, there are really only a couple of rules. First, you have to pay a one-time registration fee equivalent to about $176 US. Second, the animal must be kept outside city limits. And that's what's particularly galling about this week's incident. Authorities say that the lion was not properly registered by its owners, and Lahore is the 2nd largest city in the country, so there goes rule number 2 as well. Adding insult to injury, in an interview with local media, the husband and father of the 3 victims told reporters the owners stood by and watched as their pet clawed at his family, making no real effort to restrain it. Days after the incident, authorities launched a broader crackdown on illegal wildlife possession in Punjab province. 5 additional people have since been arrested, and 13 lions have been recovered. The chief ranger of Punjab's Wildlife and Parks Department told media outlets that they are pursuing the toughest punishment possible for the trio arrested in this case. Under the Wildlife Act, they could face up to 7 years in prison or a fine equating to about $17,500 US. At the time of this recording, the investigation is ongoing, and the video of the attack has sparked fresh debate in Pakistan about keeping big cats as status symbols in urban areas. The case of a missing motorcycle in Thailand took an unusual turn this week when the man accused of stealing the vehicle reportedly attempted to outsmart police and witnesses by pretending to be drunk. The whole thing began in the early morning hours of July 3rd in the city of Pattaya. According to reports, around 3 a.m. that day, a black Honda PCX motorcycle disappeared from an apartment complex in the city's Soy Bangkat area. The vehicle belonged to a 33-year-old man named Sataporn Nantuan, who, upon discovering it was missing, quickly reported the situation to police. A few hours later, while on his way to the hospital with his grandmother, Sataporn couldn't believe what he saw: his missing motorcycle sitting in an alleyway. However, the vehicle wasn't abandoned. Moments later, the man who allegedly stole it in the first place appeared and started walking towards it once again. Thinking fast, Sataporn called for help. Local residents in the area responded immediately, confronting and detaining the suspect. That's where things got weird, though. In a strange and obviously desperate attempt to avoid responsibility, the accused thief suddenly began slurring his words, staggering around, and trying to look as if he were drunk. When police arrived, they found the suspect surrounded by residents. CCTV footage collected from nearby cameras later confirmed the theft, revealing that the suspect had taken the stolen motorcycle from the apartment complex earlier that morning and had been riding it through nearby alleys. The black Honda PCX was recovered at the scene. Despite continuing to act incoherent and claiming to be intoxicated, no one was buying it, and the suspect was taken into custody. As you might imagine, the incident has quickly become a local talking point, though police were quick to remind the public that, while creative, such attempts to avoid arrest rarely work, especially when caught on camera. At the time of this recording, the investigation remains ongoing as officers work to determine if the suspect may be linked to any other thefts in the area. Authorities in South Korea's North Gyeongsang province say that a mother and a teacher are in hot water this week after they were recently caught breaking into a high school in the middle of the night as part of an academic cheating scheme to steal final exam papers. The whole thing was uncovered early on the morning of July 4th when police were called to the high school in question, which is located in the city of Andong. According to reports, the two suspects, a 48-year-old mother and a 31-year-old teacher, broke in to steal test papers, which they planned to use to prepare the 48-year-old woman's daughter for her upcoming final exams. It seems that the women were quite comfortable and confident in what they were doing. Not only had the 31-year-old teacher formerly worked at the school, but it's alleged that the women had enlisted the help of a maintenance worker at the building as well. Unfortunately for them, though, their whole plan fell apart when they accidentally set off an alarm around 1:20 a.m. When police responded to the scene, they were caught and placed under arrest. It's since been revealed that this week's crime was far from a one-off incident. Police now allege that the mother and teacher have been engaging in this kind of behavior for some time. They say that they have found evidence of financial transactions between them and suspect that this was part of an ongoing theft and bribery scheme. The school also confirmed that while the 31-year-old suspect now teaches at a completely different institution, she entered her prior workplace at least 7 times following her resignation in February of 2024. They now believe she was using these visits to steal other test materials, as almost all of the visits coincided with exam periods. The stolen materials were reportedly used to help the 48-year-old suspect's daughter, who attends the high school where the crime took place. She was allegedly given the test and exams ahead of time, allowing her to maintain top grades in her class throughout high school. She was also tutored by the 31-year-old suspect, which is illegal in and of itself. According to local media, it's against the law in South Korea for currently employed teachers to give paid extracurricular instruction. As you might imagine, the whole thing has caused quite a bit of outrage amongst other parents and students in the country, who say that more needs to be done to prevent this kind of thing from happening. But with South Korea having one of the most hyper-competitive education systems in the world, scandals like this are far from rare. Just this past June, police announced that they were investigating another cheating scheme after the answers to a nationwide English exam were leaked in an online chat room. And in February, nearly 250 people were arrested, including a number of teachers, after mock questions for one of the country's most high-profile exams were found being sold to private prep academies. As for those involved in this week's incident, the 48-year-old mother now faces charges including trespassing and interfering with school operations, while the 31-year-old teacher has been accused of facilitating theft and allowing unlawful entry. The 48-year-old suspect's daughter, meanwhile, has been recommended by her school for expulsion, and all of her past exam results have been nullified. Representatives from the Hong Kong police force say that a man is facing charges in connection with a truly stomach-churning case after he was accused of mixing his own urine into bottles of soda and putting them on store shelves. According to police, the suspect, identified only as a 63-year-old unemployed man, contaminated numerous bottles of Coca-Cola Plus and 7-Up with the bodily fluid before sneaking them into several supermarkets in Hong Kong's Sham Shui Po, Mong Kok, and Wan Chai neighborhoods. It's not known exactly how many times he did this, but disturbingly, authorities say this may have been going on for up to a year. It's believed the man targeted the specific stores where the crimes took place, possibly out of revenge after having arguments with staff members there. Disgustingly, the whole thing wasn't uncovered until the end of July, when a 9-year-old boy became ill after unknowingly consuming one of the contaminated beverages. Thankfully, the boy was discharged the same day with no lasting symptoms, though just the thought alone is absolutely revolting. Following a widespread investigation involving extensive reviews of surveillance footage at the affected stores, police were able to identify the 63-year-old suspect. Employees at the supermarkets also reportedly recovered at least 7 bottles of the man's disturbing piss pops. The 63-year-old was arrested on August 9th and now faces charges including administering a noxious substance with intent to injure. In a statement this week, Chief Inspector Alex Yao of the West Kowloon Crime Bureau described the case as serious, emphasizing that it not only threatens food safety, but also public health. He emphasized that testing of the recovered bottles did not reveal any additional contaminants or poisons beyond the presence of the urine. But, how much of a relief is that, really? Authorities have since urged the public to be vigilant, checking that drink bottles are properly sealed and showing no unusual color or volume changes before purchase. If convicted of the charges against him, the 63-year-old suspect could be looking at up to 3 years in prison. Representatives from England's Cambridgeshire Police shared an equally amusing and unsettling bit of body cam footage this week after a suspected DUI driver was recently caught while taking a little trip to Dreamland. It all started in the early morning hours of June 29th, when Cambridgeshire Police received a call from a concerned member of the public. The caller said that they had just seen a clearly intoxicated man stumble into a Mercedes van and drive off. Finding the driver took a little while, but as it turned out, catching him wasn't very difficult. That's because when Cambridgeshire Police located him shortly before 4 o'clock that morning, he was passed out behind the wheel. The man, later identified as 36-year-old Scott Tuit, had come to a stop in the middle of the road and the engine of his van was still running. Tuit was apparently so fast asleep that he was snoring loudly, leading to this priceless interaction.
Sir, hello, how are you?
Yeah, so as you just saw, things didn't go super well for the 36-year-old. After being shaken awake, he clearly did not know where he was and was slurring his words, leading officers to demand a breathalyzer test. When Tuit refused to cooperate, he was taken into custody. Last week, Tuit pleaded guilty to failing to provide a specimen for analysis. For those unaware, failing to provide a sample of blood, breath, or urine for analysis in a situation like this in the UK is treated the same as if you'd failed the roadside test. As a result, Tuit was sentenced to a 12-month community order, which includes 80 hours of unpaid work, and was banned from driving. As ridiculous as the footage is, though, understandably, police aren't laughing. Along with the body cam video they posted this week, they reminded the public of the serious dangers of impaired driving and credited the Good Samaritan who reported Tuit with helping to avoid a potential tragedy. Shoppers in a busy South Korean supermarket were left equally terrified and confused earlier this month after a woman wearing a cat mask suddenly pulled out 2 knives and began brandishing them in the aisles. The bizarre scene unfolded at around 7:23 p.m. on August 2nd, inside a store in the Okpodong neighborhood of Kolje, South Gyeongsang Province. According to security footage later released by the National Police Agency, the suspect, a woman in her 20s whose surname has only been given as A, was first seen wandering quietly through the toy section. However, without warning, she produced 2 knives and began walking through the store, holding them in the air. Children who spotted her immediately fled, while staff members tried to intervene, but quickly backed off when she advanced toward them with the weapons still raised. At one point, footage shows supermarket workers arming themselves with umbrellas as improvised shields, while repeatedly urging her to put the knives down. Instead, the woman charged at them, forcing employees to retreat further into the store. Police quickly rushed to the scene. With shoppers evacuated to safety, officers aimed a taser at the suspect and ordered her to drop the weapons. Eventually, she sat down on the floor, at which point they moved in, subdued her, and arrested her on the spot. Thankfully, no one was injured, but what stunned many was the woman's behavior after her arrest. When officers asked why she was carrying the knives or if she had other weapons, she responded only by meowing. According to police, the female suspect also gave bizarre answers that incorporated cat noises into them, saying things like, quote, "I can't tell you, meow." When asked if she had a phone, she replied, quote, "Why would I tell you that, meow?" Authorities later confirmed that the woman has a history of mental illness. She has since been placed under compulsory psychiatric hospitalization. The strange incident, which was partially captured on video and uploaded to the police agency's YouTube channel, has since been widely shared in South Korea. The footage shows the woman dressed in a pink cat mask and fur-trimmed gloves, calmly looking around the aisles before the sudden outburst. While no one was hurt, the case has reignited debates over public safety and mental health resources in South Korea, with many online commenters expressing concern that such an incident could unfold in a family-friendly shopping center. Police in the Czech Republic say they've finally caught up with a mysterious driver who's been terrorizing highways with a racing vehicle for nearly 6 years, in what locals have come to call the Phantom Ferrari case. The bizarre saga dates back to 2019, when videos first began circulating online of a Formula One-style race car illegally speeding down Czech motorways. The driver, always dressed head-to-toe in a racing suit and helmet, became infamous for blasting past traffic in the vehicle, which had no headlights, indicators, or license plates. Despite repeated sightings, though, authorities were never able to prove who was behind the wheel. That changed this past weekend. On Sunday, September 7th, Czech police tracked the car to a property in the village of Buk, about 37 miles outside the capital of Prague. Dozens of patrol cars and even a helicopter swarmed the area before moving in. Officers then confronted a 51-year-old man as he returned in the distinctive red race car. Footage released by police showed the man in full racing gear arguing with officers that they were trespassing on his property. Eventually, though, he agreed to go down to the station for questioning. There, police said he, quote, refused to comment on the entire situation. The case has now been referred for further administrative proceedings. According to reports, the car isn't technically a Ferrari, though it's often been described that way. In reality, it's a Dallara GP208, a high-performance machine developed for Formula 2 racing, the feeder series for Formula 1. Regardless of its origins, Czech officials say it was never designed for public roads. Police explained that the driver now faces fines in the, quote, several thousand crowns range, the equivalent of just a few $100s US. However, the man could also be banned from driving altogether. The situation has drawn further attention because of the suspect's online presence. He and his son reportedly run a YouTube channel called Track Zone, which has posted multiple videos of the car racking up millions of views. Following his father's arrest, the man's son blasted the police operation as heavy-handed, claiming that officers had violated his and his father's rights by storming the family property. And while he insisted there was no connection between his father and the highway stunts, he also simultaneously suggested that he doesn't care how dangerous this is. People just need to get over it, stating, quote, everyone knows very well that Formula has been running on the highway in the Czech Republic since 2019, and people will have to get used to it. We'll see what authorities have to say about that. But as of right now, Czech police have not revealed the identity of the 51-year-old man, nor have they confirmed whether he was also the person stopped in connection with the car back in 2019. For the moment, though, it appears that the long-running Phantom Ferrari mystery has finally reached the finish line. Police in the Thai capital of Bangkok say that they're pursuing a complex case against an elderly man this week after he posed as a doctor to fund his gambling addiction. And apparently, this isn't even the first time he's pulled off this scam. On Thursday, September 5th, officers from the Metropolitan Police's Division 3 raided a medical clinic in the city's Lat Phrao district, where they arrested 74-year-old Bunmak Pansila. Investigators say he had been working there for about 2 months under the name Dr. Manit, treating patients using falsified identification cards and medical licenses. According to police, the case began when they received a complaint that the identity of a real doctor, named Manit Jadhawan, had been stolen and used to apply for part-time jobs at several clinics. Authorities quickly learned that the impersonator was Bunmak, a repeat offender with a history of similar frauds. When questioned, Bunmak admitted that he forged documents and had lied about his background, claiming he was a graduate from a medical program in Beijing, China. He said he turned to the scheme because he saw that doctors earned high salaries, and he wanted to fund his online gambling habit. By impersonating a licensed professional, he was able to earn between 500 and 1,000 baht per hour, the equivalent of about $15 to $30 US. Colleagues at the clinic were reportedly stunned by the revelation. Nurses said that they deferred to Bunmak because of his age and assumed he had decades of experience. Some admitted that they had noticed unusual prescriptions he was writing for patients, but never challenged him out of respect. Others said he would actually accept feedback and make changes when pressed, which made his role appear more convincing. It turns out, though, this was far from Bunmak's first rodeo, or should I say residency. Reports say Bunmak was arrested back in 2017 for impersonating a doctor at a factory in Rayong province, and again in 2019 for running a fake practice inside a company medical room. He was even sentenced to 14 months in prison at one point, but fled before his sentence was formally read, leaving a warrant for his arrest outstanding since 2022. Now, authorities say Bunmak will face prosecution not only for this latest case, but also for his past crimes. Charges include falsifying documents, violating Thailand's Medical Profession Act, and illegally prescribing drugs. Police have transferred him to Rayong Provincial Court and are preparing additional charges tied to his activities in Bangkok and other provinces. For investigators, the case is a troubling reminder of how easily medical credentials can be forged, and how dangerous it is when unqualified people are allowed to treat patients. A year-long cat-and-mouse game between an Indian police department and a local vehicle theft gang came to a bizarre end this week when authorities finally got the upper hand thanks to an unexpected assist from man's best friend. According to reports, for some time now, police in Lucknow have been trying to catch the perpetrators behind a spree of motorcycle thefts. For about a year, dozens of the bikes had been disappearing all over the city, usually from busy market areas where vehicles are often left unattended. During investigations, it became clear that the same gang was behind most of these thefts, but because the crimes were opportunistic and difficult to respond to because of crowding and congestion, police were at a frustrating disadvantage. Well, it seems the tables finally turned this week, thanks in large part to a group of unlikely vigilantes. It all started sometime on September 7th when a man ran into a police station in Lucknow's Chowk area and yelled that his motorcycle had just been stolen. The victim had actually caught the thief in the act, and as a result, he told officers that they could still catch the suspect if they hurried. Immediately, a sub-inspector who was on duty at the police station sprung into action, jumping on his own motorcycle and beginning a chase. Initially, it seemed like he was out of luck when the thief abandoned the bike a couple miles away and quickly jumped into a car with several accomplices. However, that's when the sub-inspector caught an incredibly lucky break. Attracted by the commotion of what was going on, a pack of stray dogs suddenly surrounded the gang's car and blocked their path. The dogs were apparently growling and snarling, causing the suspects to panic and drive down an alleyway. Well, that alleyway happened to be a dead end, and it was right at the same time that additional backup from the police station arrived to help the sub-inspector. When the whole thing was over, officers arrested 6 suspects at the scene, all of whom are believed to be members of the vehicle theft ring. Authorities later arrested 2 more men and were also able to recover at least 40 stolen motorcycles. At the time of this recording, police say they are now analyzing each of the vehicles and are hoping to reunite them with their rightful owners. Authorities in the Thai capital of Bangkok say that a high-alert case took an unexpected turn this week when what started out as a frightening bomb scare ended up being an unfortunate misunderstanding over a piece of innocent exercise gear. The incident unfolded on the morning of September 12th when locals in the city's Bangbon district spotted a 60-year-old man walking through the neighborhood wearing what appeared to be a tactical-style black vest fitted with several bulky pouches. Fearing that the vest might contain explosives, residents quickly contacted police as well as the local Civil Defense Volunteer Center. Emergency crews rushed to the area and located the man in question, but once they approached him, the truth about what was really going on became clear. The man calmly explained that the pouches weren't dangerous at all. Instead, they were filled with bags of sand, part of a 40-pound weighted vest that he used for his daily fitness walks. The man reportedly apologized for the confusion and explained that he had worn the same vest many times before. In fact, residents later confirmed to authorities that he was well known in the area for exercising in the outfit. Officials on the scene stressed that the incident was a false alarm, but praised the public for remaining vigilant. They also emphasized the importance of reporting suspicious activity, while at the same time urging people to stay calm when situations like this arise. The Civil Defense Volunteer Center later posted about the case on Facebook, thanking the community for their attentiveness and reassuring the public that no explosives were ever involved. No charges were filed, and after clarifying the situation, the man was allowed to continue his morning routine. Police in Thailand say they've arrested a retired Dutch man in what can only be described as a bizarre attempted heist after he was caught dragging a stolen ATM down the road with his pickup truck. The strange incident began in the early hours of September 22nd when officers were called to the Bantum community in Konkan province. A witness reported that someone had tried to remove an ATM from the local Siam commercial bank branch. By the time police arrived, the suspect, 60-year-old Sitsa Kuflar, had already managed to rip the ATM free from its frame. Using a trolley and his black pickup truck, Kuflar was hauling the massive machine down the street. At about 2:05 a.m., officers intercepted him on a local road, noting that he was driving against the flow of traffic with the ATM bouncing behind his vehicle. Drag marks could also apparently be seen on the pavement leading to the crime scene. Authorities say Kuflar, a Dutch national living in the area, admitted that he had planned the theft as a way to get cash. He explained that he had recently transferred 10 million baht, more than $310,000 US, to his Thai wife for a business investment. But after she told him the money wasn't enough, they started arguing, and out of frustration, he decided to try and steal the ATM. Police confirmed that Kuflar tested negative for drugs and that his wife had no knowledge of the plan. A police source told reporters, quote, "She only learned about the ATM theft when we contacted her." Forensic teams collected fingerprints from both the ATM and the pickup, while bank representatives filed formal complaints. Kuflar is now facing multiple charges, including nighttime theft, property damage, and using a vehicle in the commission of a crime. Under Thai law, that last detail could add extra time to his sentence, potentially bringing it up to 10.5 years in prison, along with fines ranging from the equivalent of about $60 to $450 US. At the time of this recording, Kuflar remains in custody, and the investigation continues. A Japanese father reportedly got the shock of his life last week when he not only came face to face with a terrifying home intruder, but he also discovered the equally sick and strange reason he was there. The bizarre encounter happened just after 4 a.m. on Thursday, September 18th, when the unidentified father in question slid open the door to a traditional Japanese-style room inside his family's home. That's where he found a grown man dressed in his teenage daughter's school uniform. The outfit had reportedly been left hanging out to dry, but the suspect apparently would have actually had to break in order to get to it. Upon being discovered, the intruder, later identified as 37-year-old office worker Kenta Okazaki, immediately tried to flee while still wearing the clothing. The father, meanwhile, shouted, "Don't run away," and chased after him. A scuffle broke out outside of the home, during which the father sustained injuries to his face. But despite the struggle, he managed to hold Okazaki until police arrived. After being taken into custody, the 37-year-old was apparently quite candid with police, later admitting, quote, "I broke in to steal women's clothing." He was arrested on suspicion of robbery and assault. Authorities subsequently revealed why the father had been so determined not to let Okazaki get away. They noted that the same house had been targeted 3 or 4 years earlier, and during that crime, school uniforms were also stolen. The father added in an interview, quote, My daughter's uniform had been stolen in the past, and someone broke in again, so I thought I couldn't let this burglar get away, so I acted accordingly. Police are now looking into whether Okazaki may have been behind those earlier thefts as well, and are still investigating exactly how he gained entry into the home. Authorities on the island nation of Singapore say that a man has officially pleaded guilty to serious charges this week, following a truly unhinged incident nearly 2 years ago when he threatened to bomb a cruise ship after losing money gambling while on holiday. The whole thing began back on October 11th, 2023, when the man in question, 41-year-old Neo Hui Gim, boarded a Resorts World Cruises ship with his parents. The family had booked a short 2-day trip, which took them from Singapore to Malaysia and back. According to reports, after heading out to sea, Gim initially planned to see a concert that was being held on the ship, but was turned away after being told that tickets for the performance were sold out. Instead, he decided to make a visit to the ship's casino. He would go on to make several more visits to the casino, during which he lost around 2,000 Singapore dollars, the equivalent of about $1,500 US. Despite the fact that no one had forced him to gamble, or to keep gambling for that matter, Gim apparently blamed the cruise line for his losses. So much so that less than an hour after getting off the boat on October 13th, he began to send a series of threats to the cruise line demanding his money back. From the sounds of it, Gim got straight to the point. The subject line of his very first email to the company was, quote, "Bomb at Resorts World Cruises." The message read, quote, "If I don't receive the money, I hope that one day Resorts World Cruises will explode and all guests and service personnel will drop into the sea." Now, you might be saying to yourself, that's pretty wild, but it's not necessarily an explicit threat. Well, as I alluded to a second ago, that was only Gim's first email. Over the course of that same afternoon, the 41-year-old reportedly sent at least 2 other messages to different Resorts World Cruises employees. Those messages contain lines like, quote, "Next time, if I lose again, I'll make sure the whole cruise is burnt," and, quote, "Please return me back my monies, else the ship will explode and everyone dropped into the sea. Next time when I cruise again and happen to lose money, I'll ensure the entire cruise ship explode." One email simply stated, quote, "Your cruise will be burnt down." Now, considering that Gim's cruise had just ended, the company had to take these threats seriously and make sure he wasn't still aboard the ship. Police were called, a ship-wide inspection had to be done, and the whole scare apparently caused a significant delay for the next group of approximately 4,000 travelers who were scheduled to leave that day. Unfortunately for Gim, it didn't take long for police to figure out who he was, and that's because he'd used the same email to threaten the company that he had to book his cruise. He was arrested that same day and this week pleaded guilty to communicating false information about a harmful situation. According to local media, the 41-year-old is scheduled to be sentenced next month. He is currently facing up to 7 years in prison, a fine of $50,000, or both. Hey there. Before you take off, we'd just like to take a second and say that we really appreciate you sticking around to the end of the video. Luke and I are so grateful for our incredible Crime Zone community, so thank you for being a part of it. If you want to help Crime Zone continue to grow, one of the easiest things you can do is leave a like on this video and consider subscribing. Be sure to hit that notification bell as well and select all notifications to stay up to date with our latest releases. If you're looking for additional ways to support the channel, there are a couple of options. We've got a thriving community over on Patreon, where you can get ad-free and early access to all of our content, as well as 4 additional stories per week for each of our Crimes of the Week and Crimes of the Week International videos. Head over to patreon.com/crimezone to learn more and to meet some of the awesome people whose names are currently on screen. If that isn't your thing, we've also now launched channel memberships so you can join directly here on YouTube. Channel members get a lot of the same perks as on Patreon, including extra content, without the added hassle of having to go off-platform. Now, that being said, we know times are tough and that not everyone is able to support financially. Regardless of your situation though, we want you to know that we truly appreciate every like, sub, share, and comment that you send our way. Once again, thanks so much, and we hope to see you soon.